the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Equatorial Guinea, His Excellency Agapito Mbamuke, Your Excellencies, members of the Executive Council, the Deputy Chair of the African Union Commission and all commissioners, Dr. Carlos Lopez, Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, leaders of all AU organs, representatives of the regional economic communities, representative of international organizations, excellencies, ministers and leaders of delegation and ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished officials from capitals, and distinguished invited guests. A warm welcome to this 25th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union. Let me again sincerely thank the President, the government, and the people of Equatorial Guinea for their legendary hospitality and for putting at our disposal these excellent conference facilities. We warmly welcome the delegation of Egypt, our dear brothers and sisters back home. We will hopefully soon also welcome back the delegation of Guinea-Bissau. Your Excellencies, we are holding this meeting and the summit on the theme Agriculture and Food Security at a time when our vision for the next 50 years, Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, is taking shape. Agriculture and food security, correctly so, is a critical priority for Africa. If we get this right, it has the potential, along with what we do with the blue economy, not only to propel us towards our goal of eradicating poverty and hunger in one generation, but also to contribute towards the industrialization of the continent through agro-processing and the development of infrastructure. At the same time, agriculture and agribusinesses are critical to the empowerment of people, especially women and youth. And in the summit debate, we must look at the practical actions necessary to achieve this, including modernizing and mechanizing agriculture. Excellencies, we are already on year one of the 50-year horizon of Agenda 2063. We are therefore paying particular attention to those priority areas that will propel our agenda forward in the first decade. Amongst the things our citizens called for during the consultations, and of course things that we ourselves have prioritized in our 4-year strategic plan, include the skills revolution, education, skills, science, technology, and innovation. And our young people are calling for harmonizing curricula so that they can study and work any part of the continent, free movements of people, the continental free trade area. We have to prioritize industrialization and economic development and connecting all our capitals through modern infrastructure, rail, highways, energy, and ICT. Excellencies, without a strong union and regional economic communities as the building blocks, it will be more difficult to move our agenda forward effectively. Your session must therefore, of necessity, deal with the institutional issues. The Commission is presenting its 2015 budget for approval in the context of the ongoing discussions on alternate sources of funding. It is a matter that has been referred to the Ministers of Finance and Economic Planning, and we look forward to hearing from them the progress report and recommendations. At the same time, the financing of the Union, the stemming of illicit capital flows, and domestic resource mobilization must continue to occupy the attention of the Executive Council. The summit will also consider amendments to protocols of critical AU organs, such as the Pan-African Parliament, the African Court of Human and People's Rights, and discuss the draft statutes of the African Monetary Fund. The proposals on the table seek to strengthen the contribution of these institutions to Africa's integration and to build African capacity to deal with the issues. During the Agenda 2063 consultation, we witnessed the enthusiasm of civil society and citizens' organizations to be part of the Pan-African movement for change. We must therefore do more to ensure that the election of the new executive of ECOSOC takes place soon, so that it can play its critical role as a voice of civil society in our union. As we reported in the January summit, Excellencies, we are paying continuous attention to the effectiveness and efficiency of the Commission. We introduced changes to make our travel policy more efficient. All administrative structures required in the staff rules are operational. We are on course with implementation of the international finance and accounting standards and with the review of the financial and finance rules. Our turnaround time on recruitment is improving, with special attention to the quotas of underrepresented countries and moving the AU staff profile closer to gender parity. We will also, before the end of the year, conclude the review of the Commission's organizational structure and take stock of the skills of the Commission staff. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there is a general sense that the continent is moving forward. Our economies are growing. We are all focusing on infrastructure development, agriculture and food security, domestic resource mobilization, industrialization, investments and growth, and investments in education, skills, job, health of our people, and our regional economic integration. As we shift gear towards implementation of Agenda 2063, we urge the Executive Council to remain engaged and hands-on so as to ensure that we stay on course. Since the beginning of 2014, we have had elections at presidential, local, and parliamentary levels in Algeria, in Benin, in Egypt, in Guinea-Bissau, in Malawi, in Mauritania, and in South Africa. The normative framework of the AU Charter on Democracy, Government, and Elections remains our guide, supported by the AU Election Observer Missions, including long-term observers. They are deployed on the ground to work with member states and the national electoral institutions to ensure peaceful elections that reflect the will of our people. We recognize that some challenges remain, but we are moving forward. In the elections for the rest of the 2014, we must ensure that we continue to have peaceful and successful elections. Despite the general positive trajectory, we remain deeply concerned about the situation in Central African Republic and South Sudan, the massive loss of life, the scourge of sexual violence, and the damage inflicted on the population in these countries. IGAD and the African Union and the international community remain seized with these matters. We must continue to work tirelessly for the ceasefire in South Sudan to hold and for the violence in CAR to stop. We must urge all parties to help create the conditions for peace, reconciliation, and development so that the people can bury and mourn their dead, can rebuild their lives, plow their fields, and heal their communities. Excellencies, we strongly condemn the acts of terrorism against Kenya and Nigeria and the killing and kidnapping of innocent civilians. Unless we work with the governments to stem this tide, we are all vulnerable because terrorism, extremism, and intolerance endanger Africa's march towards prosperity, peace, and integration. Your Excellencies, in this regard, Africa and the international community must also work together in the negotiations of our post-2015 development agenda, which will start soon. The high-level committee has done a lot of work since the January summit to ensure that the common African position is finalized and popularized. We must also ensure that our ambassadors in New York speak in one voice and negotiate, basing their negotiations on the post-2015 development agenda, which is our common position. Of course, we are also moving towards the important 2015 climate change negotiations. Excellencies, the critical matter of Africa's trade with the world in the post-Bali context and at bilateral level with EPAs and AGOA remains high on the agenda as we seek to build trade partnerships that will aid Africa's industrialization and integration, its agricultural development, and its drive for shared prosperity. Excellencies, in March, we had the Africa-EU Summit, and there will be a meeting of Africa-US, Africa-Turkey Summit in the coming months. And of course, we'll also have the important summit that will be looking at employment and eradication of poverty in Burkina Faso later this year. It is important that we seize these opportunities to speak with one voice and advance the agenda of the continent collectively. Africa, therefore, continues to navigate its way in global matters, resolute about furthering its common interest. Your Excellencies, you have a heavy load of work ahead of you. I wish you fruitful deliberations and thank you for your attention. Merci beaucoup, muchas gracias, shukran, asante sana.